I'll never forget the night it all started. It was a regular family dinner. At least that's what I thought. The table was set neatly, the usual chatter filled the air, and my dad sat at the head of the table like he always did, scrolling through his phone as Mom brought out the food. My younger sister, Chloe, was sitting there with this smug little smile, and I didn't know why at the time, but I should have taken it as a warning. I'd been living in that house for years, balancing my job, contributing to the household bills, and quietly staying out of the endless drama my parents always seemed to create around Chloe. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was the one who had to earn every bit of respect.
Respect that never fully came.
Dinner started as usual, but the tension felt thick. Dad cleared his throat, set his phone down, and looked directly at me. That alone was unusual. He hardly ever addressed me first at family dinners. "Lily," he began, his voice calm but firm. "What, we need to talk about your room." Immediately, my stomach tightened. My room? What about it? It wasn't just a room to me, it was my space. The only corner of the house where I could breathe, without feeling overshadowed by Chloe's constant demands and my parents' expectations. Chloe jumped in before I could even respond. "Now, Dad, tell her. She's had that room long enough. I'm older now. I deserve it." She said it like she was claiming a prize she had already won. She was 17, just 1 year younger than me, but she'd always acted like the world revolved around her. My parents had indulged that behavior for as long as I could remember. Dad leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said the words that would change everything. "Either give your room to your sister or pack your things." For a few seconds, it was like time froze. The fork in my hand hovered midair. I looked at Mom, expecting some kind of intervention, some voice of reason, but she just sat there, avoiding eye contact, as if this whole thing had been planned behind my back. Chloe looked triumphant, like she'd just won a battle she hadn't even fought. "Wait," I finally managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're telling me to give up my room? The one I've been living in for years? The one I pay part of the mortgage for? Are you serious?" Dad didn't flinch. "Chloe needs more space. She's older now, she's starting college next year. It only makes sense." I let out a bitter laugh. "She's 17. She's not even moved out yet. And I'm the one who actually contributes to this house financially, remember? Or does that not matter anymore?" Mom finally spoke, her voice soft but firm, the way she always talked when she was trying to guilt-trip me. "Lily, don't make this difficult. Your sister needs that room. You're an adult now. Maybe it's time you think about moving out anyway. This could be good for you." I stared at her in disbelief. Good for me. Being kicked out of my own room, in my own house for my sister's convenience, was good for me? My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. I had spent too many years trying to earn their approval, too many nights listening to them praise Chloe while treating me like a guest in my own home. I knew if I argued, it would only turn into another shouting match that would end with me being painted as the difficult one. So instead, I sat there quietly, nodding slowly, memorizing every detail of that moment. The way Chloe smirked, the way Mom refused to meet my eyes, the way Dad spoke like he was doing me a favor. But inside, something clicked. A switch flipped that night. If they wanted me to pack my things, fine. But they had no idea what kind of comeback I was capable of. I had been working hard for years, saving money quietly, planning for my future. I wasn't going to beg for space in a house where I was clearly not valued. As dinner ended, Chloe pranced off to her room, humming happily like she'd just won a prize. Dad returned to his phone as if nothing monumental had just happened. Mom gave me a tired, dismissive look like this was all settled. I cleared the table silently, my mind already racing, not with sadness but with strategy. That night, as I lay in my bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every word. "Give your room to your sister or pack your things." They thought they were pushing me out. What they didn't know was that they were giving me the push. I needed to make my next move, the one that would leave them stunned. The morning after that dinner, everything felt different. It wasn't just my room anymore, it was a symbol of how easily my parents could discard me the moment I didn't fit into their perfect picture. As I stood in front of my mirror getting ready for work, I caught a glimpse of myself, and for the first time in years, I didn't see someone quietly enduring their unfair treatment. I saw someone who had finally had enough. I was done fighting for scraps of respect in a house where I was only ever tolerated. I drove to work with my mind racing the entire way. I worked as a project coordinator at a growing tech firm. It wasn't the most glamorous job in the world, but it paid well, and more importantly, I had been disciplined about saving. while Chloe spent every holiday getting spoiled with expensive gifts and weekend getaways. I had been building something for myself, slowly, quietly. I didn't tell my parents much about my finances. Honestly, they never cared enough to ask. They assumed I was just getting by, never realizing that I had been investing carefully, building a substantial emergency fund, and planning for the day I'd move out on my own terms. Well, now those terms had arrived. During my lunch break, I opened my laptop and started browsing real estate listings, not just casually like I sometimes did when dreaming about the future. This time I looked with intention. I filtered for properties in my neighborhood, but something inside me pushed further. Why not near my parents' place? The thought started as a joke in my head, but the longer I stared at the map, the more serious it became. If they wanted to push me out, what could possibly be more poetic than moving out into a house that stood directly across from theirs? I laughed under my breath at the idea. A $1.2 million house facing theirs. It sounded crazy, but the market had a few listings, modern homes, recently built, some just a few streets away. I called a real estate agent that same day and set up a viewing for the weekend. Back at home, things grew tense. Chloe had already started moving some of her stuff into my room, acting like she owned the place. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. My posters and decorations were slowly disappearing as Mom redecorated to make it more Chloe's style. It was like watching strangers dismantle a part of my life. While I stood there invisible, Dad made offhand comments at dinner like, "You should start looking for apartments," and "You're independent now. This will be good for you." He said it in that cheerful, condescending tone that made my blood boil. Mom avoided confrontation, pretending everything was normal. One night, Chloe walked into my room uninvited, looked around and said, "I think I'm going to paint the walls lilac. It'll look so much better than this dull color you picked." She didn't even look at me. She was already mentally erasing me from this space. I forced a smile. "Knock yourself out," I said flatly, then turned back to my laptop. She smirked, thinking she had won. What she didn't know was that I had already been approved for a mortgage. Pre-qualification earlier that day. My good credit score, steady job, and savings had put me in a solid position. Things were moving fast. Over the next few weeks, I kept my plans completely to myself. I showed up to work early, stayed late, and met with the agent on weekends. Every time I walked through a potential house, I imagined my parents' faces when they saw me pull into my own driveway across from theirs. That image alone fueled me. One particular house caught my eye, a modern 2-story home with huge windows, a spacious backyard, and a sleek minimalist design. It was everything my parents' house wasn't: open, bright, and welcoming. And the best part, it was directly facing their street. From the master bedroom balcony, you could see their front door perfectly. It almost felt like fate. I spent a sleepless night thinking about it, weighing every risk. Was it petty? Maybe, but it was also practical. I needed my own space, and I wanted to make a statement. I wasn't the helpless extra daughter they thought they could push aside. The next morning, I put in an offer. When my agent called me later that day to say the sellers accepted, I nearly dropped my coffee. It was happening. I had just bought a $1.2 million house facing my parents. In the meantime, at home, my parents were growing more impatient. "Lily, have you found a place yet?" Mom asked one evening, pretending to sound concerned, but failing miserably. Chloe was practically bouncing with excitement over her new room. I calmly told them, "Yes, I found something." Dad nodded, satisfied. "Good. It's about time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet." I smiled to myself. If only they knew. As the closing date approached him, I started packing my things, but quietly, without any fanfare. They thought I was moving into some modest little apartment somewhere far away. That was exactly how I wanted it. On my last night in the house, I stood in my soon-to-be former room and let out a deep breath. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. I was finally choosing myself over their approval. And this time, they would see it. Not through words, but through actions. The day of the big move arrived on a crisp Saturday morning. The sky was clear. The air had that fresh, new beginning kind of chill to it. My moving truck pulled up to the house right after sunrise. And for the first time in months, I felt light. Every box I carried wasn't just filled with belongings. It was packed with years of quiet endurance, late-night planning, and silent dreams that no one in my family had bothered to see. My parents didn't even bother to help. They assumed I was moving into some small apartment across town, probably with peeling walls and barely enough space for a bed. Chloe stood on the porch in her pajamas, sipping orange juice with a grin like she'd finally gotten rid of me. "Good luck," she called out sarcastically as I carried the last box to my car. I didn't react. I just smiled, not the bitter, forced smile they were used to seeing, but a calm, knowing one. I shut the trunk, took one last glance at the house I'd grown up in, and thought to myself, you have no idea what's coming. The drive to my new house was only 10 minutes, but it felt like crossing into a completely different chapter of my life. As the moving truck followed me, I turned onto the familiar street, the one where I'd ridden my bike as a child, the one where my parents' house stood proudly, and then, there it was. My new house, modern, bold, facing theirs. When I parked in the driveway for the first time, it hit me how perfectly poetic it all was. From my front yard, I could see their entire house. From their porch, they would have a clear view of mine. This wasn't just moving out. This was making a statement. The movers quickly got to work hauling in furniture and boxes. I gave them directions with a steady voice, hiding the thrill bubbling inside me. By noon, most of my things were inside. I stood in the empty living room surrounded by half-open boxes, sunlight flooding through the tall windows. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, freedom. Meanwhile, back at my parents' house, I could see activity through the windows. Chloe was dragging her furniture into what used to be my room. Mom was rearranging the curtains. Dad was mowing the lawn. None of them had noticed me yet, not properly. They had no idea their eldest daughter had just moved, directly across the street into a house that dwarfed theirs in every possible way. That changed in the afternoon. I was out on my new balcony, sipping iced coffee and watching the movers unload my final few items. When I saw Dad step out of their front door, he paused a mid-step, squinting at the house across the street like he was trying to make sense of something. I saw the exact moment he recognized me. His eyebrows shot up and he froze. He turned back into the house quickly. Not even a minute later, Mom stepped outside. Her reaction was priceless. Her jaw literally dropped. She clutched her phone in one hand, shielding her eyes from the sun with the other, staring at me in disbelief. I gave them a little wave from my balcony. Nothing dramatic, just casual. Their expressions said it all. Shock, confusion, maybe a touch of embarrassment. Chloe came running out soon after, and when she saw me, her face twisted with something between annoyance and disbelief. By evening, the neighborhood grapevine had done its job. Neighbors walked their dogs a little slower past my house, sneaking curious glances. A couple from across the street even came over to introduce themselves. "You must be the new owner," the woman said cheerfully. "Beautiful house." "Thank you," I said with genuine warmth. "It's a big change, but I'm excited." Inside, though, I could feel my parents watching from their living room window. I knew how they operated. Image mattered to them more than anything. And now their most difficult child, the one they pushed out, had moved into a house worth more than theirs, right across the street. That night, my phone started buzzing with missed calls. First Mom, then Dad. I let them go unanswered. Then came the text messages. "Mom, why didn't you tell us you were moving here?" "Dad, this is unexpected. Can we talk tomorrow?" "Chloe, seriously? Across the street? Are you trying to be dramatic?" I chuckled to myself, tossing my phone aside. I wasn't doing this to be dramatic. I was doing it to finally live on my own terms. And if my independence made them uncomfortable, that wasn't my problem anymore. Over the next week, things only got more interesting. My parents tried to act like everything was normal, but I could see the unease in their body language every time they stepped outside. Dad would glance at my house whenever he collected the mail. Mom would linger on the porch pretending to water the plants, sneaking glances like she still couldn't believe it. Chloe hated it the most. She avoided making eye contact whenever I drove past in my sleek car. Waving politely, I kept my distance. I didn't flaunt, but I didn't hide either. Every light that turned on in my house at night was a reminder to them that I wasn't gone. I was right there, stronger than ever. And as the weeks passed, I started settling into my new life. My job was going well. My home felt more mine every day. And for the first time, I wasn't tiptoeing around anyone else's expectations. What they didn't know was that the best part of my plan hadn't even happened yet. I had one final move up my sleeve, something that would turn their quiet discomfort into unforgettable shock. 2 weeks after I moved into my new house, the phone calls from my parents had slowed down, but their curiosity hadn't. I could feel it every time I stepped outside. Mom would hover near their porch pretending to check the mailbox, even though she'd already done it an hour earlier. Dad would stand with his arms crossed on the front lawn, staring at my house with that same puzzled expression, like he still couldn't quite accept the reality of what had happened. Chloe would roll her eyes every time she caught a glimpse of me, but even her fake confidence was starting to crack. Then one Friday evening, it finally happened. I was in my living room unpacking the last few decorative pieces when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my mom and dad standing there together. Mom was clutching her purse like she was about to attend some formal meeting. And Dad had that serious, no-nonsense face he always wore when he wanted to talk business. For a moment, I just leaned on the doorframe, enjoying the sight. "Can we come in?" Mom asked, her tone hesitant but trying to sound polite. I raised an eyebrow. "Of course," I said smoothly, stepping aside. They walked in and looked around like they were stepping into another world. Their eyes scanned the open floor plan, the tall ceilings, the elegant staircase, the way the sunlight poured through the windows. This house was everything theirs wasn't. Modern, warm, sophisticated. "Wow," Mom finally said. "You really settled in." Dad nodded, though I could tell he was holding back his astonishment. This place is impressive," he admitted reluctantly. I gestured for them to sit, and we ended up in my living room, the three of us facing each other. But this time on my turf. No more family dinner tables where they dictated the conversation. No more quiet nodding on my pot. This time, I was in control. "So," I said, crossing my legs and giving them a polite smile. "What brings you here?" They exchanged a glance, one of those silent, parental exchanges where they tried to decide who should start. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Lily, your mother and I, we were surprised when we found out you moved here, right across the street. We didn't even know you were looking for a house." "I didn't think it mattered to you," I replied calmly. "After all, you were the ones who told me to pack my things. Remember?" Mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "That's not what we meant. We just thought it was time for you to become independent," and I cut her off gently. And I did. I became independent in the best way possible. I let the silence linger, watching their reactions. Dad leaned forward slightly. "How did you even afford this place?" There it was, the real question that had been burning inside them since the moment they saw me here. I smiled faintly. "By working hard, saving, planning. While you were busy giving Chloe everything she asked for, I was building my future quietly. This house is the result of years of effort that none of you ever noticed." They were quiet. For once, Mom didn't have a snappy response. Dad didn't have a lecture. It was almost satisfying watching them try to process the fact that their overlooked daughter had outgrown their expectations. After a long pause, Mom tried a different angle.
Well, it's nice that you're close by.
"Maybe this is a chance for us to rebuild things." Her voice was careful, testing the waters. I tilted my head slightly. "Is that why you're here?" "To rebuild. Or because you suddenly realized your daughter owns a house bigger and more expensive than yours?" Mom flinched. Dad gave me a sharp look, but even he knew it was a fair question. Then came the unexpected part. Mom took a deep breath and said, "Lily, we might have been too harsh on you. We didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't belong." I didn't respond right away, because part of me had waited years to hear something like that. But the other part, the wiser, stronger part, knew that words alone didn't undo years of neglect and dismissal. I leaned back, choosing my words carefully. "You know, I spent years trying to earn your approval. I stayed quiet when Chloe got everything. I contributed to the house without complaining. And the one time I needed to be treated with a little fairness, you chose her over me without hesitation. So forgive me if I don't rush to pretend everything's fine now." Dad opened his mouth to respond but stopped. Mom lowered her gaze. For once, I wasn't the one left speechless. Then came the moment I'd been anticipating. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "Your father and I were wondering if maybe you could help us out a little," she said slowly. "The roof needs repairs and things have been a little tight financially. We saw your car, your house. We thought maybe..." I couldn't help it. I laughed, not a mocking laugh, but the kind that comes from realizing just how predictable people can be. "You kicked me out for Chloe's room," I said. "And now you're asking me for financial help?" Mom stammered. "It's not like that." "Oh, it's exactly like that," I said firmly. "You only remember me when you need something. Not when it's about birthdays or family decisions or respect. But when you see something shiny, suddenly I matter." The silence that followed was heavy. Dad cleared his throat and muttered something about misunderstandings. But it didn't change the truth hanging in the air. Finally, I stood up. "I think this conversation is over." I have plans tonight. They slowly got up, looking uneasy. As they walked to the door, Mom turned back, almost pleading. Lily, please don't shut us out. I gave her a polite but distant smile. I'm not shutting anyone out. I'm just finally living my life on my terms. They left quietly. I watched them cross the street, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them before. Chloe opened their door, asked something, and they both waved her off tiredly. That night, I stood on my balcony, looking at their house. Lights were on. Shadows moved inside. But for once, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. It was the other way around. They were the ones peeking through their curtains now, watching me build something they never thought I could. And when the neighborhood saw the new sign I hung on my gate the next day, Lily's place, welcome home. The message couldn't have been clearer. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I just showed them who I'd become. And the look on their faces every time they saw me after that. Let's just say they'll never forget it.